Hello, this is Nicholas Hernandez, and I will be reviewing the Anthropocene Reviewed Canada Goose chapter. So the main argument of this chapter is that people like Canada geese are terrifying, and this can be seen when John Green states, "So I feel unsettled about the Canada goose, both as a species and as a symbol. In a way, it has become my biggest fear." So in order to understand the concept of the chapter, we have to use the PASS method, which stands for purpose, audience, speaker, and situation. Within this chapter, the purpose is the Canada goose, as well as how it represents John Green's fears, as well as how something as simple as a goose can paralyze someone with said fear. The main audience of the chapter would be those interested in birds and who want to learn more about the Canada goose, as well as why there's a sheer amount of them today. And also his audience encompasses those with irrational fears, anxiety, and also introverts, because he eventually relates Canada geese to people. In his review for Canada Geese, John Green elaborates on the history of the bird species and also applies a bit of humor as well as personal stories and anecdotes to better appeal to his audience. And also for situation, not really a specific situation that is described within the passage, but for a little bit of context, this book was a series of podcasts that John Green made that he compiled together in the form of a book. So breaking down the chapter. This chapter is going to be broken down into 5 to 6 sections. The first 5 sections are the actual passage, and they're going to be split based off of different aspects of the Canada goose. So for example, paragraphs 1 and 2 would be an intro to the geese. 3 and 5 would be a history on how they almost went extinct. 6 to 7 could be how they're connected to humans. 11 through 15 would encompass how the Canada goose has impacted Green's life through a short anecdote that he tells us about how him and his girlfriend were talking about their fears. And then paragraph 16 through 17 is pretty much an overall reflection on the role that the Canada geese play within the Anthropocene, as well as how terrifying these birds can really be. And the last section is Green's final judgment. So that would be his review for the chapter, what he rated the Canada goose out of 5 stars. So in the first 2 paragraphs, Green opens the chapter with a physical description of the Canada goose, in which he also makes a joke as to how they like to attack people while sounding like a dying balloon, which I find hilarious. He then transitions into the population status of the Canada goose, and he notes on how despite there's millions of them today, there was a point in time where they were almost at extinction due to hunting and this thing called live decoys. So within paragraphs 1 and 2, there are, in the green, we do have a description of the overall chapter, because that is the main subject. The main subject is the Canada goose. So it's kind of fitting that Green would start off with a description of the main subject of the chapter. Also, this is a way for Green to clearly and humorously describe the Canada goose to the reader when he says, "With a song like a dying balloon and a penchant for attacking humans, the Canada goose is hard to love, but then again, so are most of us." Also, the yellow shows Green's use of humor to appeal to emotions, and this sort of makes light of the situation. He also gets the audience intrigued by stating that the Canada goose was once rare and almost went extinct, when he says, "The giant Canada goose, which was believed to be extinct early in the 20th century due to year-round unrestricted hunting," as well as when he says that even though that the global population is growing, there was a point where they were considered rare. Now in paragraphs 3 through 5, Green provides a brief history on the Canada goose, where he notes that the use of live decoys and unrestricted hunting laws almost led them to their extinction. And he also mentions that now that live decoys are made illegal, the population was able to bounce back to what it once was, being to about 4 to 6 million, which is crazy. In this short excerpt, this is an allusion that Green makes to a point in history of the Canada goose, in which they almost went extinct, but over time, they were able to bounce back to a species with a population of millions. And in the second part of the excerpt, he does mention that when all hope was lost for the Canada goose, scientists were able to find some that were still alive, and they were able to miraculously recover. And the yellow is Green appealing to his ethos, which the history he's writing about lets the reader know that he has researched and has gained knowledge about the Canada goose. And also within his credibility, he also appeals to emotion, not only by telling the readers about this inspiring story on how an endangered species was able to bounce back and get taken off the endangered species list. And he uses words like spectacular and it turned out to make it sound like that plot twist, that satisfying ending that most people like when it comes to stories. Now in paragraphs 6 through 10, Green describes the habitat of the Canada goose as well as its main diet. And it is also here where he starts to begin to draw parallels and make connections between Canada geese as well as people, where he elaborates on how human actions have created the perfect environment for the geese to thrive in. This is one of those longer excerpts, so In the red, it's not really essential to the meaning of the chapter, but it's something nice to point out. With Green mentioning Kentucky bluegrass, this is a slight foreshadowing to one of his future chapters, in which he does speak about Kentucky bluegrass and how there's a ton of it. So in this chapter, he says that the presence of Kentucky bluegrass in almost every American lawn does serve a pivotal role in the lives of Canada geese, as it is one of their main dietary components. And then in the dark blue, we have a bunch of comparisons that Green makes to build more connections between Canada geese and humans, to the point where both parties equally dislike each other. And that is one of those situational ironies in which, even though people have shaped the environment to one that is essentially a haven for Canada geese, they still dislike people. Kind of like his original comparison at the very beginning, where he mentioned that Canada geese are kind of like people, where there are introverts that don't really like to interact with other people. So then we have paragraphs 11 through 15. And in this section, Green likes to reflect on the mutual distaste that humans and Canada geese have with each other. And he further elaborates on the concept in which he tells a story where him and his girlfriend were both talking about their fears. And after that short little anecdote, he explains that the fear of geese isn't too crazy, as it is something that people are unable to control. So, for example, like a fear of, let's say, the dark, that is something that can be eventually overcome. A fear of geese, that can't really be controlled. So the devices in paragraphs 11 through 15. In the orange, most of this excerpt in general is an anecdote told by Green in which he and his girlfriend were talking about their fears, where his girlfriend mentioned that she was afraid of geese. And then he follows this anecdote up with a justifiable reason as to why people should be afraid of Canada geese, where he mentions the 2009 incident where a flock of geese flew into the engines of an airplane, and also a case in 2014 where a Canadian cyclist spent a week in the hospital after being attacked by a goose. And then in the dark blue, it's another one of those comparisons that Green makes between his fear of abandonment and his girlfriend's fear of geese, where he also says that a fear of abandonment can be overcome, that it's something that you can control. It's something that you can overcome yourself. A fear of geese, not so much. It's something that you can't control. The geese are going to be there no matter what. So then we have paragraphs 16 through 17, where Green concludes his chapter with some final thoughts, and he reflects on the role that these geese play within the Anthropocene, and also how it connects to the role of people. And the final sentences of this chapter is where he admits that his greatest fear is both the Canada goose, literally and symbolically, and that is where he states the purpose of the overall chapter. So in the dark blue, we have Green making some more comparisons between people and Canada geese, as he goes back to a reference that he made earlier in the chapter to the situation where the geese population was super low and it just bounced back, kind of like how the human population continues to exponentially grow. And then in the purple, that is where Green essentially states his purpose. He ends off his chapter with his purpose, saying that all of the information that he mentioned prior to it built up to his overall thought on the Canada goose. And regardless of whether it's literal or symbolic, Canada geese are one of Green's biggest fears. So for Green's judgment, he gave the Canada goose a 2. And although the Canada goose got a below average rating from Green, he does provide just enough reasoning to give his terrifying avian creature a 2 out of 5 stars. Even though it did have a remarkable recovery from near extinction, the shocking resemblance they have with humans, as well as the fact that people have irrational fears of the bird, are what made Green lower the overall rating. So a quick review of the chapter. The main focus was the Canada goose and how its species embodies Green's fear of both the animal itself and his fear of people. This purpose is reinforced with his anecdotes and allusions, as well as the multiple connections he was able to highlight between both people and the Canada goose. With the use of devices like comparisons, humor, allusions, anecdotes, and diction, Green prominently uses pathos and ethos, which is his credibility and his appeal to emotions, to develop the overall theme of this chapter. Pathos can be seen when he mentions near extinction for the geese or fear. Ethos would be when he mentions a study from a scientist where they were able to find the goose and bring it back, or even like the statistics from like 2014 when the biker got attacked by a goose, etc. So those were the two main appeals that Green uses throughout the chapter. So this would be my overall review of the chapter itself. I would give it a 4 out of 5. Even though Green has a justifiable reason to give his 2-star review, I personally find Canada geese to be one of my favorite types of birds. And also I enjoyed learning more about this species, as well as how there was a point where almost all was lost until they eventually came back to a world that serves as a paradise for them. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. Hope you all have an amazing day.